So now I'm happy to be here with you in the dream time. And what I want to talk about first tonight is shamanism, because the shaman is the paradigm figure for our movement, I think. The shaman is the person who knows how the world really works. The shaman is the person who knows how to live in the world. And how is this living in the world discovered and found out? There are all kinds of models of shamanism, that it is somehow an institution where one person becomes an exemplar for a society, that one person can go into the unconscious, can obtain the gift difficult to obtain, can slay the dragon, can seize the pearl, can return to this world with a lost soul, with health, with knowledge, with understanding. But how is the trick done? And what is it precisely to know how the world works? If you think about what shamans do, they predict weather, they tell where the game has gone, they cure, and they find lost objects and settle little domestic hassles within the group when people run off with the wrong chicken, or sleep with the wrong person, or violate some taboo of the group. And if you think about these things, predicting the weather, deeply seeing into the problems of the group, seeing where the game has gone, guiding the dead souls to their resting place, it all comes down to dimensions. It all comes down to the fact that the cultures we live in are lower dimensional slices of reality, and they keep us infantile, and they keep us common, and they keep us stupid. And the shaman is someone who has gone beyond the society and risen, literally risen, into a higher dimension. And in shamanism around the world, some shamans fly, some climb ladders into the sky, but there's always the metaphor of vertical ascent. Because when you rise up out of your world, it spreads out below you, beneath you, and you see it from an entirely different perspective, from another dimension. And then the question is how to do this, how to dissolve the boundaries of what has been taught, how to move beyond the common notion of reality. And the answer is, and I think Rimbaud got here first, a deliberate perturbation of consciousness, wiping out the lower dimensional assumptions of education and life in foolish, shallow, and empty societies. The mind has evolved in we human beings as a kind of threat detection device in three-dimensional space, so that the foraging predator can be detected before it is too late. Ordinary consciousness is based on the assumption of paranoia, and ordinary consciousness is constantly processing the data about nearby space-time to preserve the body, the cradle of consciousness, but put guards at the cave mouth and build the fires high at the cave mouth and move back into the darkness with the furs and the women and the children and the fire. And then in that atmosphere of security, putting your fate in the hands of magical plants, the mind unfolds like a butterfly leaving the worm of its origin behind, and you make what Plotinus called the flight of the alone to the alone. And as you launch yourself on your ascending spiral flight, all time and all space takes its place beneath you, to be seen through, to be understood, to be brought back to the human family, to be made part of a higher reality that is slowly being built over time. Because shamans are not only the curers and healers of Aboriginal society. Artists are shamans. Musicians are shamans. Doctors are shamans. Chemists are shamans. And the shamanism of the postmodern era is the shamanism that reaches back to the oldest techniques. And it is techniques of breath, sexual techniques, and the plants. It cannot be done without the plants. You require a partner. You require a symbiote from the natural world who will allow the scales to fall from your eyes. And then you discover that the culture you came up through, the culture that shaped you, knows only so much, can take you only so far. And at some point, you become uncomfortable with it, with its simplifications, its betrayals, its stupidities, its blindness, and turn away from sanctioned cultural values to create with your friends, with your peers, with your mates, a common language not known beyond your circle, a common language based on an experience that lies at the very fractal edge of English. And that's where we want to be, where the unspeakable meets the present at hand, and we want to push that fractal domain and push language through story and poetry and revelation out into the darkness of the unspeakable and make the human world larger and more comfortable for exploring shamanic minds. Cultures all over the earth have done this in different ways. Only the culture of Western Europe has lived so long away from these mysteries as to fall under the addictive spell of money, materialism, science, monotheism, monogamy, and tastelessness. Our challenge is to see the failure of this world, and without blame and gently to point in another direction, the direction the elders have been keeping, the direction that was preserved while we made the journey of the prodigal son into history to learn the secrets of matter. And now that cycle is closed. The snake takes its tail in its mouth, and we become the inheritors of this enormous body of knowledge and understanding that dissolves our boundaries, not only the boundaries between ourselves and other people, between men and women, between human beings and the land, between human beings and the animals and the plants around us. But the boundary between life and death itself is transparent to the shaman. The shaman is not a body with a soul, but a soul with a body. End of Rap 1. I wanted to bring you more than a rap. I wanted to bring you some kind of spiritual food. I wanted somehow to bring you information that would change your life. No, inspiration is part 3. This is information which will change your life. Basically, news from the world of plants, shamans, and chemistry, which you may not be aware of. You know, part of what is making our community work is the internet and the speed with which it spreads discoveries and information important to our tribe. And some of you may know and some of you may not know, but a plant has been discovered or recognized that grows in central Mexico that has important implications for our community. The plant is Salvia divinorum. What's interesting about it, many things, but it contains a new psychoactive, highly psychedelic compound. A compound that is stronger than any other psychedelic ever found in a plant in terms of the amount necessary for the human response. 800 micrograms of the chemical in this plant is more than a handful. So we're talking about a plant that is basically as strong as laboratory LSD when its active principle is extracted. The chemical that's making all this happen is in a family previously not known to contain any psychoactives, diterpenes. This compound is not an alkaloid as LSD, psilocybin, DMT, and all our friends are. It's not an amphetamine as mescaline is. It is a diterpene, and it's been used for millennia by the Tzeltal, Tzotzil-speaking people of the Sierra Mazateca of central Mexico. But no haole, no whitey had ever gotten off until about 5 years ago. And then the technique, which is hardly any technique at all, was revealed. This plant will grow anywhere in the temperate zones of this planet. It will grow in any urban apartment. It is completely legal. It is legal to grow it, possess it, transport it, advertise it, advocate it, do therapy with it, synthesize it, manufacture it, so forth and so on. And it is profoundly other. We're getting DMT test pilots back, ashen and white-knuckled from this puppy. So, here's the puppy, yes. And this plant is being sold on the internet, and it's being sold on flyers distributed here this evening. And my advice to everyone with an interest in these matters is, before the establishment has time to react and manufacture false tales about this thing, and before people jump from dormitory windows or lose their gonads or go publicly mad, I suggest you get your hands on this stuff. When I first heard about it, I was very trepidatious. I couldn't believe that someone would tell me that something was stronger than DMT, or that it was even in the same parade. The first time I took it, and the way I do it, is I weigh out about 35 grams, a fistful of fresh leaf, and I roll it into a quid, and I put it in my cheek, and I lie down in silent darkness where I can see a digital clock, and I squeeze with my teeth, and I expel this liquid into my mouth. And at about the 17-minute mark by the digital clock, you begin to get what somebody calls streaming. This is what you see after orgasm sometimes, purple and chartreuse blobs of light moving past your eyes. But then it quickly becomes profoundly psychedelic. The first time I did it, it was preposterous. It was dancing mice and little pink kitties and kick-stepping teddy bears and this sort of thing. And as I watched this, I realized that it was making fun of the fact that I was afraid of it. And so I said to it, I'm chicken shit, but I'm not that chicken shit. The next time I did it, it was in Mexican rainforest, camping by myself in a tent in profound darkness. And the first thing I noticed was I could see in the darkness. I could see everything was blue and white and dimly outlined, but there was no doubt about it that you can see in the dark with this stuff. And then it was as though I played a round of poker with an invisible partner who possessed a magic deck of neon blue iridescent cards, which were shuffled and drawn out in front of me and plopped down on the ground. As a connoisseur of ayahuasca, which has a tradition of blue hallucinations, Bill Burroughs called it the search for the blue flash, I have to say the blue of salvia is a deeper, more profound blue than I've ever seen in this world or any other that I've visited. Subsequent trips with this stuff have been extremely interesting and challenging. In a dark room on a moonlit night with silver light coming in, with eyes open, there were no hallucinations. And then I would close my eyes, and with the speed of switching on a bedroom light, I was in an undulating, colored, recessional labyrinth of moving light and sound, as profound as any DMT flash. And this is all on the leaf, mind you. This is the chewed leaf. This is the weaker way of doing it. My son and his friends took it up, and they smoke it in bongs. And two leaves, which ain't much, pushed into a bong and done with a hash smoker's zeal, will cut your legs out from under you and leave you twitching on the ground in the grip of the alien goddess. So be forewarned. Now, there's a side to this, which is both a challenge and a responsibility for our community. If we extract and purify this, 800 micrograms is the effective dose, and you smoke it, so there's no going back. 800 mics looks like a small grain of salt. Certainly some moron will smoke 10 or 50 times too much. And then we will find out what the LD50 of this stuff is. So it is now completely legal worldwide. This is a dream come true, people. If we manage this thing correctly, it will be preposterous to attempt to control it. It would cost as much as the world budget for the control of cannabis currently costs. I don't think the establishment is ready to take on another easily grown, extremely potent, apparently harmless, powerful shamanic substance. So if we're cool, it will probably remain cool. And this could be the wedge that opens the door to a complete re-examination of the proper role of these psychedelics in society. So I drop my poetic license here for Rap 2 in order to convey this information to you. With this and with DMT, I think we have psychedelics as powerful as we need to have. If there's shit out there that gets you more loaded than this, please keep it away from me, for crying out loud. I'm having enough trouble staying up with the program as it is. So, it's legal. It's this place or this planet? This country? I think that, no, the answer is certainly not. Certainly not. No one is in charge of reality. The whole point of psychedelics is that you're not having to genuflect to some guru, some tradition. Well, yes, I think the thing to do is put the information out there and let people sort it out for themselves. If you want to negotiate it with an elder, negotiate it with an elder. But if somebody else doesn't, I don't feel any obligation to deal with that. There are elders. Well, if I fucking come out of it, in what way am I fucking gone? I'm used to people making slightly more sense than this. The point is, the planet is full of psychedelic resources. Now, this elder question, the interesting thing about Salvia divinorum is that the people who use it are mushroom people. And they specifically told the anthropologist who discovered it, we don't claim this. Dig the fact that these people speak Tzeltal and Sotil, and when you ask them, what do you call this plant? They say, hojas de la pastora, means leaves of the shepherdess. They use the language of the Spanish conquest to name this psychedelic plant. Now, any anthropologist can tell you what that means is that this is not a plant they have been using for millennia. This is something new. Now, what makes salvia interesting in this light is that it's not known from any other place on the planet except this very small area in Mexico where the people use a foreign language to name it. So what I'm suggesting is this is an unclaimed psychedelic. Nobody's got their brand on this thing. It is there to be used by the new evolving culture. And as we make our way out into the flora of the planet, we will find many things like this. Many of these psychedelics are not as old as you might wish to be congealed. Ibogaine, unknown in Africa before 1870. And even though the Europeans had been in there since the 1430s. Peyote, people imagine it stretches back thousands of years into the past in the northern Mexican area. Not. 1888, when the ghost dance religions began the archaic revival of the North American people. That's when peyote came in. So I am at war with all hierarchies. Some are easy to hate, some are hard to hate, but all are diminishing your freedom and your humanness, in my humble opinion. Take it away, maestro. any gathering of indigenous people or shamanic people that promotes further respect for them and their traditions should certainly be supported by people like us, because we are also a tribe under pressure and excluded from the ordinary business of reality. In this final third segment, what I want to do is sort of try and give a feeling for why I think we should feel very confident and optimistic in the face of a situation that is very complicated, the world as we find it. We carry around a lot of meat, but in fact, what we are really is the expression of a molecule that we share with all life. I'm talking about DNA here. If you set the switches on DNA one way, you get dragonflies. I'm getting there. If you set the switches if you set the switches another way, you get seahorses or human beings. I mean, we are like programs run on the computer of DNA. A double helix, not unlike the double helix that you see behind you. A spiral of light that takes its form, I believe, from the structure of the medium in which it came to be. And the medium in which DNA evolved is time. Things which evolve in time have the signature of time within them, the architecture of time embedded in them. And what the psychedelics allow us to do is go beyond ourselves as individual expressions of this magic molecule and actually see into the commonality of all life in the past. You see the forward march from the naked genes of the Earth's Archaeozoic past to the membrane and nucleated microscopic life that dominated the Earth for much of its history, and then DNA clothed itself in form. It discovered multiplicity. It expressed itself as plants, as animals, as human beings. In my first rap, I talked about how shamans rise into a dimension from which they can see a vast distance, not only into human motivations, not only into the circumstances of their group, but into future time. And Aboriginal peoples all over the world, and indeed people all over the world, who sink into the messages of the unconscious and are capable of listening to the whispers on the wind, are bringing the news that time is running out on this planet, that the history of life is not only a record of unfolding complexification, but it's a record of complexification that has occurred faster and faster as we move through time. And this complexification and acceleration of time reaches its culmination in us, because about 15 or 25,000 years ago, we added to the genetic game of mutation, gene transfer, and natural selection, the new game of epigenetic change. By inventing spoken languages, by chipping tools, by telling stories, by inventing dances, we launched an entirely new order of being on the world. Not genetic realities, but epigenetic realities that precede each other with enormous speed. Cultures come and go 10,000 times faster than species come and go on this planet. And this tendency toward acceleration is not going to falter. I believe we live in a universe where 90% of its unfolding will occur in the last hour and 35 minutes of its existence. We are under the influence of some kind of attractor which lies ahead of us in time, and which is pulling us ever more rapidly into its embrace at the very in the very act of shaping us in its image. So somehow this earth, the life upon it, is in interactivity with something invisible, unseen, but whose presence permeates all space and time, and whose presence is actually sculpting the architectonics of the natural world. We are moving towards some kind of a mirror-like transcendental object at the end of time. And this is what religions are about. Religions are the misguided attempt to define what this thing is too early in the game. And it is still too early in the game. People ask me, well, what's going to happen in 2012, or what's going to happen when it all comes together? It's like asking a man at midnight facing east what the nature of the dawn will be. It's too early. It's too early. Ask me in 2008. But what I feel, what my psychedelic intuition tells me, is that the future was never in human hands. It was we were always part of a larger dynamic with a purpose, and sometimes we fail to understand this purpose. For instance, we have anxiety about the extinction of species. 90%, 95% of all life that ever lived on this planet is extinct. What nature seems to glory in is the extinction of species. They are ephemeral. They make way for something new. There have been enormous catastrophes in the history of this planet that bear no fingerprints of human meddling. The catastrophe that killed off the dinosaurs 65 million years ago, nothing larger than a chicken walked away from that on this planet. It looked like a dark day. But had that catastrophe not occurred, the flowering plants, which are the source of these psychedelics, would never have radiated across the planet in their thousands of genera and hundreds of thousands of species. If that catastrophe had not occurred, we would still be egg-stealing shrews at the edge of the action. It was the clearing of the evolutionary deck that allowed the mammals to make their opportunistic leap towards starflight and the internet. So when we try to second-guess nature and name this thing as bad and that thing as good, we assume a godlike understanding that is in fact not ours to assume. We are actors on an evolutionary stage, directed by a mysterious and unseen director who loves us and all life on this planet with an incredible ruthlessness, because nature will always sacrifice what is achieved for what might be achieved. I don't believe that human beings can slip from the yoke of natural control. So it's impossible for me to see a city like Melbourne or Manhattan as any different from a coral reef or an orchid. Granted, we are a destructive species. But on the other hand, the proliferation of complexity on the planet has not halted in the presence of human beings. Complexity seems to be our great glory, and through our arts, our languages, our technologies, we have pushed into domains no animal species ever could. So my attitude toward all this is one of consuming wonder and anticipation. I think we are now so close to the transcendental object at the end of time that all you have to do is shut up and close your eyes, smoke a bomber, remember your dreams, take a walk on the beach, take a walk in the rainforest, pay attention, and you can feel novelty flowing into the world, transforming and remaking the world at an ever more accelerating pace, with ever greater urgency. And we do not know our place in this. We do not know whether we are to be the ecologists and caretakers of the earth because it is our home, the only home we will ever have or know, or perhaps it is no more to our destiny than the placenta was once to your destiny. When it finishes its job, you bury it under the old apple tree and carry forward. The universe is a vast and mysterious place. Build the fire of understanding larger, and you will reveal ever greater darkness. Expand the sphere of understanding, and the surface area of ignorance will grow ever greater. This is the nature of understanding, that it reveals the presence of the mystery. It doesn't provide solutions. Solutions are the hobgoblin of small minds. Real understanding leads to the ability to live in the presence of unresolved paradox. The world is an unresolved paradox. You are an unresolved paradox. The phenomenon of being alive is an unresolved paradox. Because we live in a society that always wants its myths to come to closure, the myths of science, the myths of capitalism, the myths of our politics, we live in a flattened, shallow, idiotic world where everything makes perfect sense except that all is lies. The psychedelic dispensation is the release from this kind of logical trap. The psychedelic dispensation leads to the mystery of the felt experience of the moment. And this, to my mind, is what it's all about. This is what dance culture and rave culture is all about. It's what sex is all about. It's what psychedelics are all about. You don't plan sex months in advance. You don't plan authentic experience months in advance. And yet we live in a world completely dominated by plans, schedules, and cycles of activity. The felt presence of immediate experience is the psychedelic dimension. You know that because when you go on acid to the coral reef or the rainforest and simply feel into what the fruit flies and the spiders and the sea anemones and the birds and the plants are all about, you discover a seamless world of minded, optimistic intentionality. Life itself is the greatest unlikelihood of all physics, and the fact that we find ourselves at the center of it, feeling, thinking, probing, reaching toward death, reaching toward birth, reaching toward higher understanding, means that we are the focus of this paradoxicum. In a sense, we are the philosopher's stone. We are that shamanic pearl recovered at the center of the world well. We simply have to discover this within ourselves by throwing off the lie of culture. I can't stress this enough. Culture is not your friend. The whole point of psychedelics is that if you take them, whether you are a stockbroker in Manhattan or a camel dealer in Saudi Arabia or a sadhu in the Himalayas, you will ask yourself if your life makes sense. You will ask yourself if you are living as you should live, and you will cast your gaze further afield and ask yourself, is the society I'm living in sane? Is it gentle? Is it humane? Is it at peace with the earth? Is it at peace with its minorities? Is it at peace with its assumptions about its destiny? And in most cases, the answer is no. History is ending for this reason. Scientific rationalism, in contact with the mystery of the human mind, throws up its hands in despair because the paradox cannot be resolved in scientific terms. We are on the brink of the first truly civilized human society that has been launched out of Western culture since the bust-up of Pangaea. We are on the brink of recovering and recognizing the presence of magic in the world, not as a theory, not as a rumor, not as anthropological data, but our magic in our moment, made accessible and possible through the humbling act of taking on a partner who may have their roots in cow shit, or who may have their roots in the loam of the rainforest. I don't think it can be done any other way. That's why I'm not interested in rishis and roshis and geishas and gurus. I don't want to sweep up around the ashram. I don't want to kiss ass for 15 years before they let some juice loose for me. I know that those traditions are thin soup and pale downloads of the real thing. I've been in many cultures trying to suss out their secrets and their mysteries, and when I came to the real stuff, there was no hierarchy. There was no sense of myself as the ignorant intruder and the people I was coming to see as holders of superior knowledge. When I went to South America, as I said in India, what can you show me? And in South America I was told, well, let's sharpen our machetes and hike out here to the forest half a mile and bring back some vine, and we'll show you what we can show you. People who have knowledge want to share it. I asked the mushroom once this question about gurus and hierarchies and spiritual whoop-de-doo and so forth, and it said to me, and I say to you, for one human being to seek enlightenment from another is like one grain of sand to seek enlightenment from another. The psychedelic message is, your flesh is my flesh. Your thoughts are our thoughts. There is no such thing as a private thought. All thoughts that any of us have are downloads from the collective sea of mind in which we swim. That's what the word zeitgeist means. It means the pervading spirit of the time. And the pervading spirit of this time, stretching from Frankfurt and Joburg and San Francisco to Melbourne and Byron Bay and who knows where, the zeitgeist of this time is a zeitgeist of hyperdimensional transformation and endless affection and opportunity for the human enterprise of understanding and growth. What our obligation is to care for those around us, not only the members of the human family that may feel anxiety or trepidation about the enormous change that is sweeping over them, but for the entirety of the earth. You know, we talk a lot about the destruction of Aboriginal cultures, and certainly this is happening, but the culture I grew up in has been destroyed. I imagine the culture you grew up in has been destroyed. All localized and vital cultures have given way to this Earth as international airport arrival concourse, which is not where any of us want to be, I think. This is the death rattle of the dominator mind, the death rattle of scientific materialism and consumer capitalism. Why the death rattle? Because people are awakening to the fact, said often but rarely understood, that the kingdom of heaven is within. This is what the psychedelics teach, that you have more beauty in your head, visible in 20 minutes, than all the art hung in all the galleries of this planet. Each one of us is a greater font of creativity than the entire aesthetic output of the cultures in which we're embedded. So my conclusion from this is the obligation here is to make art, to make love, to communicate, to spread psychedelic consciousness and the means to attain it, whatever that may be, and regardless of who doesn't like it, because this is more important than the agenda of any church, any government, any political party. This is a human right. It is absolutely basic to our humanness to be able to dissolve our identities and return to the Gaian womb and the source of all meaning and all contextuality. And any force which tries to interfere with that is an anti-human force that has to be resisted lovingly, but named clearly, because I saw once in Colombia a graffiti. There was a picture of a mushroom on a wall, and in Spanish it said, "Without this, you are not yourself." And this is the issue about the psychedelics. Are they alien intruders? Do they create chaos in the brain, toxicity in the body, so forth and so on? Or are they the lost half of ourselves, lost when we fell from the Saharan psilocybin Eden into the nightmare of human history? And now we're about to awake from the secular nightmare of human history to the all-pervading and never-absent dream time, which is what hyperspace is, and to which we will make our way back as prodigal sons, while the elder civilizations, the shamans of Australia, the Amazon, Assam, you name it, while they kept the ancient shamanic faith, we made a prodigal son's journey into matter, and we return with enormous secrets. We too have done our homework. Fusion, fission, the sequencing of the human genome, the understanding of the structure of the local and distant cosmos, these are things that will be welcome around the fire when we return to our mother's home. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Want some more water, Cat? Yes, play! How I get over there now? What?
If the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed. such a radical break with the natural systems of biological organization that preceded it, that it must be the response to a kind of attractor or dwell point that lies ahead in the temporal dimension. Persistently, Western religions have integrated into their theologies the notion of a kind of end of the world. And I think that a lot of psychedelic experimentation sort of confirms this intuition. I mean, it isn't going to happen according to any of the scenarios of orthodox religion, but the basic intuition that the universe seeks closure in a kind of omega point of transcendence is confirmed. It's almost as though this object in hyperspace, glittering in hyperspace, throws off reflections of itself, which actually ricochet into the past, illuminating this mystic, inspiring that saint or visionary, and that out of these fragmentary glimpses of eternity, we can build a kind of map of not only the past of the universe and the evolutionary ingression into novelty, but a kind of map of the future. This is what shamanism has always been about. A shaman is someone who has been to the end. It's someone who knows how the world really works. And knowing how the world really works means to have risen outside, above, beyond the dimensions of ordinary space-time and casuistry, and actually seen the wiring under the board, stepped outside the confines of learned culture and learned and embedded language into the domain of what Wittgenstein called the unspeakable, the transcendental presence of the other, which can be sectioned in various ways to yield systems of knowledge which can be brought back into ordinary social space for the good of the community. So in the context of 90% of human culture, the shaman has been the agent of evolution, because the shaman learns the techniques to go between ordinary reality and the domain of the ideas, this higher dimensional continuum that is somehow parallel to us, available to us, and yet ordinarily occluded by cultural convention out of fear of the mystery, I believe. And what shamans are people who have been able to decondition themselves from the community's instinctual distrust of the mystery and to go into it, to go into this bewildering higher dimension and gain knowledge, recover the jewel lost at the beginning of time, save souls, cure, commune with the ancestors, and so forth and so on. Shamanism is not a religion, it's a set of techniques, and the principal technique is the use of psychedelic plants. What psychedelics do is they dissolve boundaries, and in the presence of dissolved boundaries, one cannot continue to close one's eyes to the ruination of the earth, the poisoning of the seas, and the consequences of 2,000 years of unchallenged dominator culture based on monotheism, hatred of nature, suppression of the female, so forth and so on. So what shamans have to do is act as exemplars by making this cosmic journey to the domain of the Gaian ideas and then bringing them back in the form of art to the struggle to save the world. shockwave of eschatology. And what this means for those of us who will live through this transition into hyperspace is that we will be privileged to see the greatest release of concrest change probably since the birth of the universe. The 20th century is the shudder that announces the approaching cataracts of time over which our species and the destiny of this planet is about to be swept. If the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed. The emphasis in house music and rave culture on physiologically compatible rhythms and this sort of thing is really the rediscovery of the art of natural magic with sound. That sound, properly understood, especially percussive sound, can actually change neurological states, and large groups of people getting together in the presence of this kind of music are creating a telepathic community, a bonding that hopefully will be strong enough then to carry the vision out into the mainstream of society. I think the youth culture that is emerging in the 90s is an end of the millennium culture that is actually summing up Western civilization and pointing us in an entirely different direction, that we're going to arrive in the third millennium in the middle of an archaic revival, which will mean a revival of these physiologically empowering rhythm signatures, a new art, a new social vision, a new relationship to nature, to feminism, to ego. All of these things are taking hold, and not a moment too soon.
As you may know, I practice a profession for which there is no real name. What I have been doing for 40 years is practice the psychology of individual freedom. It's my job to corrupt young people with the contagious, infectious idea of individual freedom. It is my job to encourage you and to empower you to think for yourself and question authorities. CIA and the military that brought LSD to America. Authorities. They wanted to drop LSD in the Russian Moscow water supply, reducing the Russians into loving Buddhas. Question authorities. Question authorities. One individual with electrons in his hand can bring down an empire. If you want to keep things moving, you should free the elements. Free the elements. Some people call that chaos. Any reality is an opinion. You make up your own reality. Wow. reality is an opinion. You're equipped with 100 billion neuron brain that's wired and fired, and it's a reality generating device. But you've got to do it. You've got to do it. I have probably used my brain, explored my brain, operated my brain, navigated my brain. From psychedelics to cybernetics, my brain has been inundated. My brain has been through a lot. Wow. In this new electronic cyberspace technology, there's no limit to imagination. Everybody gets the drug they deserve. Everyone gets the God they deserve. And everyone gets the electrons they deserve. Go for it all. Any reality is an opinion. You make up your own reality. Wow. Think for yourself and question authorities. Question authorities. Question authorities. It is my job to corrupt young people with the contagious, infectious idea of individual freedom. Chaos. Chaos engineering. It was the CIA and the military that brought LSD to America. They thought there was a wonderful way to fuck people's heads up. Question authorities. You're equipped with 100 billion neuron brain. It's wired and fired and it's a reality generating device. But you've got to do it. Free yourself. But you've got to do it. I have probably used my brain, explored my brain, operated my brain, navigated my brain. From psychedelics to cybernetics, my brain has been inundated. My brain's been through a lot. My brain's been through a lot. Wow. One individual with electrons in his hand can bring down an empire. Go for it all.